Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance Sexton, thanks for joining us. Katie Roach, as always, thank you. Sort of a light news day, Lance?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit bigger than normal.
No, thank you all for joining us. Hey, let me start off with this. This was on the wires this morning that Trump has approved the revised stimulus package, but Treasury Secretary Mnuchin says he spoke to Ms. Pelosi, and while they want to do something, they still don't think it's going to happen until after the election. So there's movement, and remember what John Riosti said yesterday, the problem solvers, they're inches apart, so we could be shocked over the weekend, Lance.
I hope so, Bob, and we're going to talk about what got released this morning, which is a small improvement.
Katie, what do you think is going to happen? Let's talk Washington, and we're going to talk about PPP.
In Washington, I could see it going either way. We've really been trying to predict when we're going to get something.
Unsuccessfully, I might add.
And every time it seems like they get close, I think there's just problems, especially with combining this bill with some of the other issues. You see things where some of the funding, you see it getting a little polarized there. So I would hope that we could get something at least for PPP and for small business out a little faster. And I think that's what a lot of people are pushing for. So hopefully we'll see that sooner. But I don't know if we're going to see it before the election.
I think that's a fair statement. Hey, obviously the big news is PPP forgiveness. When did this hit, Katie? When did it hit your inbox?
I didn't get it in my inbox until about 5 this morning, but I think it did come out yesterday evening.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. So the first question we have is, does the Form 3508 simplify PPP loan forgiveness for those loans under $50,000?
Bob, this is, if people have had an opportunity to digest the form, I think the answers are going to be very mixed.
%60 say yes. What's your opinion, Lance?
Well, again, I had the form for the morning, had the opportunity to read through it and review it, and I think it is an improvement. In particular, it's an improvement on the bank side because there'll be less documentation that has to be submitted to the SBA forgiveness portal. On the borrower side, it is an improvement because the form is shorter. But if you read through those certifications, the borrower is still having to provide documentation to the bank to prove out payroll, rent expenses, utility expenses. It didn't take that away. I was thinking the short forgiveness might just be the form we receive that the borrower checks the boxes that says, I used the money properly, and then they did not have to provide payroll documentation. But if you look at the certifications, it does require the borrower still to provide the information to the bank. The other thing on the form that's kind of interesting, my good friend Bryce Green texted me. I didn't catch this until I got his text. The expiration date on this form is October 31st, which, as we were discussing before this show, that could be a variety of things. Most of the PPP forms had short expiration dates, but that also could tell me that there's something else that may be coming out very shortly.
Let's hold off on that. Well, let's discuss that further, but let's go to the second poll question is, do you require the same information for a loan less than $50,000 versus loan less than $150,000?
I look forward to seeing the responses here. And they got it, Bob. I mean,
You got it right.
in terms of what the borrower is providing you, there are different forms, but the documentation supporting those forms is going to be very similar.
Lance, we'll get Katie in the conversation, but let me go to you first, Lance. The obviously there's a lot of pressure on this. They got this out. It's not what the industry wanted. It's not what all of us wanted. But do you think it's a step in the right direction? And do you think there's the other shoe to drop? As you said, these forms expire October 31st.
I do think it's a step in the right direction. The form is shorter. It's simpler for a borrower to complete. It did not take away the requirement to provide documentation supporting your expenses, but the form is certainly simpler for a borrower to complete. On the financial institution side, Bob, it certainly simplified things. You're going to have less that you have to send to the SBA forgiveness portal. But I do think the expiration date is at least me, and Bob, I speculate on all kinds of things. You guys who are on these calls realize, frequently I speculate, but the 1031 expiration date in my mind says there's something else on the horizon.
There has to be. I mean, at a minimum, they're going to go ahead and extend it. But hopefully they're going to do what we want them to do. Finally, do you have the sufficient infrastructure to process these forms? Katie, what do you think they're going to say?
I think a lot of people, especially with this new form, are going to feel like they can probably process this. I mean, they still have to receive, as we were saying, most of the same documentation and things.
Oh, very good. I'm glad to see that. Yeah.
I think
I'm glad to see that too. Go ahead, Katie. I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I pretty much finished. I was just saying that I do think this form is going to help a little bit, especially, I think more on the lender side, just making it a little shorter is going to help that, but they still have to have all the documents and everything like that. But I think this is a good sign that, 64% are saying yes.
That's what I want to do for the rest of this program, to show what the certifications are. We were hoping for, which was simply a one certification that the borrower did it, submitted. The lender now is in the position of having to do these certifications. So let's go to the first one, Joseph. Let's move on to one slide. And here's a bunch of them. Lance, wax philosophy.
Well, I mean, it's just a certification that the money was used properly, that the percentage of payroll was at least 60%, that the covered period did not exceed, or the 24-week did not exceed 2.5 times of the 19 compensation, that they didn't break the $100,000 compensation rule. So, I mean, they basically are asking for a full-blown certification that all the calculations are correct.
Lance, if we have the expenses come in and it's at 50% payroll and 50% overhead, what do we do?
You're going to recommend less than full forgiveness.
Well, that's my question is, do you get, can we the forgiveness less that, or is the whole thing not forgiven and converts to
the tough part of this, Bob, is so much of PPP is relied on borrower certifications, and SBA and a lot of their FAQs have said we as participant bankers don't have to go in and crunch all the numbers. We can rely on the borrower certification and the borrower's presentation of information. Although I feel like we as participant bankers are going to have to take a look at payroll documentation and the expenses and just kind of do a quick cursory scan and make sure the numbers are in line. Yeah.
Let's go to the next slide.
The thing is, Bob, I don't see a participant lending institution. You don't have to spend 3 hours crunching numbers, but, take a quick look at the total payroll during the covered period and, make sure it's 60% of the loan amount.
And this certification comes from the lender, not the borrower. How important is this, Lance?
I think it is important. Again, in a majority of cases, these certifications are pretty simple, pretty straightforward. But Katie has had many Fraud Friday stories of people buying expensive cars and jewelry and going to gentlemen's clubs and things like that with their PPP funding. And you're saying, Bob, this is the participant bank certification. How am I going to know? Other than they presented appropriate documentation to support the PPP forgiveness amount.
Yeah. And of course, then we want to certify that we have the tax returns are consistent, and understand SBA may request additional information. So that's where we are today on Friday, October 8th, or excuse me, October 9th. We think we're going to have more guidance, but I'm glad to see that at least we're moving in the right direction. Correct, Katie?
Yeah, I do think this is a step in the right direction. I think everybody was hoping for something like blanket forgiveness, at least for maybe that, under $50,000 or so. So I think it's a little disappointing for some of the people in the industry that were hoping for that. But maybe that still will pass with Congress, and this is just a temporary thing. Like Lance said, these documents really do expire at the end of the month. So I think SBA and maybe even Congress is expecting some kind of change here before the end of the month. And if there isn't a change, of course, they'll probably just extend these documents to go for another couple of months.
Well, and Bob, I had a phone conversation on the way to doing this show with a family member who had a PPP loan that was over $50,000 but under $150,000. And I told him, I said, just hang on. I mean, the Flexibility Act gave you 10 months from the end of your covered period before you had to start paying payments, before you had to submit the forgiveness app. So, I mean, there's plenty of time. Now, I know a lot of small businesses are anxious to get this over with. And, if that's the case, just use the 3508 EZ if you're over 50,000. It's not that difficult. Get it submitted. As I shared with my family member, SBA is now forgiving loans in significant numbers. So the forgiveness process has started, but I still think that, this $50,000 forgiveness, Bob, I was hoping that it would be a checkbox that says, yes, I use the funds appropriately, and sign it.
Very good. Well, we got part of that, but we also have, again, we want to emphasize that there are certain things the lender is responsible for. Let's go to some questions. Emily has I'm sorry. This came up yesterday regarding data, and as you can see, 2020 for 7A was a little down. We were confused about John's reporting where he was looking at previous month numbers. Lance, those numbers aren't surprising to you at all, are they?
No, basically, Bob, you had almost all the SBA lending institutions in the country that had a 3-month vacation from SBA 7A lending, dealing with PPP. So not surprised at all. The numbers are down. It's like I shared with you. I bet there was a record volume during the last 2 weeks of September, SBA lenders trying to get deals done so they could get the CARES Act payments. But I'm not surprised that the numbers are slightly down.
I got a press release yesterday from Huntington Bank, and they are saying they are claiming they're the nation's largest originator by volume of SBA loans. Congratulations to them. When we get the final numbers, we will, of course, do our Coleman Report 500 and tally them. Let's get to this. I love all these questions. Thank you very much. We only have about 10 coming in, Lance. But let's get to we've been holding poor Emily's question over, and she has a question regarding escrow funds for a seller's PPP loan. This is a business acquisition situation. What's the best practice, Lance?
Well, and I apologize, Emily. Of course, that's the BizAc loans, and in dealing with a seller that has a PPP loan that was just released. I did not realize that you could not escrow part of the proceeds of the 7A loan and I need to double check and make sure that's accurate. But
yeah,
if
that's,
that
I
is,
read that the other day. Yes, you cannot do that. Yeah.
so given Bob's certification, that's correct.
Representation.
Yes, the seller's going to have enough money to put in escrow to cover the PPP loan.
Well, and I think we're at the point that if we're in that type of situation, let's just get it, go through the paperwork, get it forgiven, or know exactly what we're dealing with, or whether it's a grant,
Yeah.
or a loan. That. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Emily. And lightning round, let's go to Russ's question. This is held over. Lance stated the lender should do modifications to round one loans to reflect change in terms. But do you have an solid authority that those terms are retroactive to round one? What should we be doing?
Yeah, the terms that the Flexibility Act apply to both round one and round two loans. However, SBA has stated that you're not required to modify loans. But I feel like a lot of institutions probably will modify the loans. Not exactly sure. It'd be an excellent poll question, Bob. Are they just going to rely on SBA's statement that you don't have to modify these and just go in the system and check the box that they're still on deferment, or are they going to do a modification? I'm not exactly sure.
You mentioned yesterday that you said some institutions will do the modification anyway. We're allowed to do that, correct?
Yeah, and I think some institutions will feel more comfortable with an appropriate modification. You know, let's play devil's advocate. You've got a PPP loan, you don't modify it, it doesn't get forgiven, then you've got some issues with the documents you have to collect. You know, SBA said that you don't have to modify it. It wouldn't affect the guarantee. But I think a lot of institutions probably will do modifications. That's my guess. I could be totally wrong, Bob.
Okay. But half the questions that we have are saying, okay, we're confused. Why do we need to do a 3508S for loans less than 50K? Couldn't we just regularly use the regular easy form? I have not gone through it in depth. It just came out. Lance, what's your opinion on that?
If you've got a borrower that have one under 50 and they've already submitted a 3508 EZ and you've submitted it to the SBA portal, you should be fine.
Can we use a 3508 going forward for loans less than 50? Do we need to use this new form?
SBA did not answer that question, Bob. You know, I've told borrowers for the longest, I'm like, hold on. And some recently I've said, look, go ahead and do the 3508 EZ. It's not that difficult. Go ahead and do it. Get the attached supporting documentation and submit it. Again, I don't think you have to backtrack and redo forgiveness applications that have already been done on the 3508 EZ.
No, we're not saying that at all.
But I think going forward, just have them use 3508S.
Okay. Jamie wants to know, there's several comments. We mentioned the October 31st date. So, Lance, we won't hold you to it. Well, maybe we will. But, I mean, do we continue to wait, or we just bite the bullet and start submitting these? What's your opinion?
Well, given the fact that these loans can be deferred up to 10 months past the covered period, you know, I'm telling a lot of small businesses, it's like I told you, the conversation with a family member of mine who had one that was more than 50 but under 150. I'm like, just wait another month and see what happens, because it is highly, you know, the expiration date, the things that are going on in Congress, in the CARES, or not the CARES Act, but Katie, what's the new one? Heroes? I don't know what it's called.
Adjusted version of the Heroes Act, yeah.
Yeah, so in that version, it had the 150 number in it, did it not?
I thought it was 50 for that one, but I could be wrong.
Was
That
it
could be
50?
a different one.
It was 50. It was 50.
One of the proposed bills that I saw had the 150 number in it. So I'd still give it. I think most small businesses will want to get their forgiveness app completed prior to the end of the year. Now,
And we're still a
when
while away.
well, and let SBA's timeliness, they've started processing forgiveness apps, but they've got a backlog, and I promise you they don't have enough people to keep on top of the enormous number of applications that are going to come in. So my thought, Bob, is if somebody's just now putting together a forgiveness app and submitting it, it might not get approved in 2020. It's possible, but it might not.
Couple other comments. I know we're running out of time. I apologize for that. Russell says, in his opinion, this is just a temporary act since Congress hasn't gotten their act together. There's more for coming. Raymond says, do you think, and this is a great question by Raymond, do you think this is about as far as the SBA Treasury could go without a formal congressional intervention?
Yeah, absolutely. Bob, Katie, and I had this conversation prior to the show. I think they just got something out that they could I don't want to say get away with, but they put something out there that they felt like they wouldn't get in trouble with, and as much as they could. And I believe that we probably will see something, hopefully up to 150 on this blanket forgiveness soon. And it's not really blanket forgiveness, Bob, on this form.
Sandra makes a great point. She says, let's remember that the Act does require lenders to check calculations. So there was no leeway for the SBA and Treasury to do away with calculations altogether. The Act is confusing because it also says we want to give lenders as much freedom as possible to get this out. But Sandra, thank you for that. Finally, last question. Michael is a business owner. He has a partnership. We do not get paid payroll in the normal sense. What do we need to provide to our lender to get forgiveness? This is a partnership where I assume they're taking out expenses.
Well, I think you go back to the application. How was the loan amount calculated on the application? Did you use a Schedule C? If you used a Schedule C, then well, what was used? The partnership tax return, was that what was used? If so, a interim financial statement might be the appropriate supporting document. If payroll was used as the primary source of the loan amount originally, then payroll records and forms are going to be appropriate. But I think... I'm
sorry, I'm interrupting you, but you made the great point. Go to your original application and what the supporting calculations were, and to provide the documentation to support the initial application. I think you're absolutely right. Great.
Absolutely.
Let's see, Lance, you're going to put all this mess together in a concise, easy to understand format next Thursday. Katie doesn't know this yet, Katie, but you get to put together a little guide. We're going to take those 52 FAQs and IFRs or whatever, and all this stuff that we're getting from SBA. We're going to put it in a nice, neat, concise guide to help you with this. So that's you two have your work cut out for you for next week, Lance.
It's going to be a fun time.
And of course,
hey guys,
Lance, go ahead, Lance.
Don't forget the PDK webinar on October the 14th, guys. We all know that there are going to be some challenged borrowers in our portfolios, and we want to know how to get paid by SBA.
Great. Well, very good. Hey, my philosophy is I like to start on time and end on time. We do say we go to 10:25. You all know I try to get through by 10:20. Just gives us a little extra minutes. So I have allocated officially our full 25 minutes. Lance, thank you very much. Katie, thank you all for your questions. Send them in after this show. We'll talk about everything on Monday. And with that, have a nice weekend.
Have a great weekend.